Okay, I think we're all set up here. Hey, I am good to see you. Godwin didn't win. Ah, but that's where you're wrong, I am. He will never die so long as he continues to be the subject of batshit insane theorizing. Now we want to keep you. We'll keep you. Layer 3 hard here. I can't remember. Is there like a specific one? No, yeah, but this is... Oh, you know what? I need to make sure I'm online for this one. Howdy, Xavier. Good to see you as well. By the way, I did mention this on the trail streams I did, but I did actually change up my setup for streaming through Elgato, so I think the frame rate should be better for you guys. Yeah, it should be like going directly from like what the frame rate is on my TV and not what's on the Elgato on my PC. So I think that should lead to something actually, you know, happening. There we go. Let's do this now. Thinking of some headcanon where Godwin wins. Well, we'll see. We'll see what this is up about. I will say, you guys were sending me suggestions and stuff, and I'm like, you know, none of these videos, they really were, like, catching me. I wasn't really, like, too, like, really enthused about kind of listening to them. But then it just so happened, I guess because you guys have been sending me so many, the algorithm sent me one of my feed. I'm like, this one seems interesting. I don't know if it's right, but it's interesting. Yeah, I think we can remove you. By glyph, I guess? No. It doesn't really matter. Anything interesting? Interesting with the rod and the fetid, huh? Yeah, not interested in any of these, so we'll just do our own. It's weird to me how they put the Ailing Loran here, because, like, it's not in the Japanese name. It should just be Lower Loran, so I don't know why the localization decided to add that here. It's such a weird choice. Anyway. Yeah, we don't want to do anything else to add on to it, just a standard one. Red jellies. Oh, we're running out of cold flowers, though. All right. Perfect, perfect. Nick, I'm not reading that with that text. It's gonna drive me crazy. Also, good to see you in the chat. My eyes, my eyes. It's too small on my little OBS. All right. So while we let's actually first get ourselves in here physically. But while we do that, we are going to be listening to this little number. It is called Proof Radigan is Connected to Godwin's Death in Elden Ring. I feel like the moment you put Radigan and Godwin in the same sentence, it's already going to be limited in the algorithm to Elden Ring stuff, but what do I know? Maybe not, you know? Localization strikes again. Yeah, it does. Always striking. Loki is blind. I guess I am blind. Anyway, so this sounds crazy. I'm very curious what the justification is going to be. Like, what is the reasoning here? But it is one of these things where I'm just like, this is so like bizarre specific that it's either going to be completely batshit insane or I'm missing something. And if I'm missing something, that's great. That's great for me to figure out what I'm missing. But for those that have been following me the last few weeks, I have been giving some thought actually to America breaking the Elden Ring. And you know, what would I call that topic if I were to pen an analysis for it and all that stuff? And I also may settle on orders breaking and all that. But I kind of went through and I tried to go through every scenario that could even possibly set up this idea that America was behind the Night of the Black Knives and the assassination of Godwin. I kept coming to the same conclusion. Nah, bruh, that shit crazy. And yeah, I'm still at that position. So hearing this, that I'm apparently supposed to believe that good old Radigan is involved as well. It's not just America. It's a little zoomed in. That's just the thumbnail. It's the thumbnail, believe me. I cut off the ends that would be usually blacked out. So unless this is like a widescreen vid, this will be like I could do like this, but like that'd be something. Anyway, right? Like you guys should be able to see it just fine here, right? So it shouldn't be that zoomed in. Anyway, so I'm going to do this. Feel free to tell me if the video's too loud, if I'm too loud, if the game's too loud, like whatever it is that feels like it's off balance, feel free to tell me while we go through this. I feel like the volume is decent, but again, feel free to let me know. Let's listen. I need to hear what this...
In my previous video and in my popular post on the Elden Ring Lore Talk Reddit, I postulated that Radagon is the true villain behind the events of the Shattering, the series of historical events that caused Queen Marika the Eternal to shatter the Elden Ring and trigger a series of wars between the demigods.
Oh boy,
in
I already
Norse mythology, a similar event occurred.
Okay, so the Shattering refers to specifically the war. It is in the Japanese specifically referred to as the Shattering War. It is referring to the idea that Marika's kingdom had shattered, it had fractured, much like the Elden Ring had, into various factions that would be infighting because the different demigods each claimed a great rune, a shard, a shattering, a slithering of the Elden Ring, and essentially laid claim to becoming the Elden Lord who would essentially marry their mom and take over, right? Create the new order. So that is what we're talking about here. So already we're having a little bit of a curious conundrum here in how we're framing this. I love me some Elden Ring spoilers. Oh boy, what am I getting myself into, chat?
Called Ragnarok, and it's all triggered by the machinations of Loki, a guardian of Asgard, the pantheon of the gods. Loki also just happens to be the trickster god, the literal god of deception, and the cause of many of Asgard.
All right, so I will say this. I have no problem with people trying to start out with a framing of an external reference for the sake of, you know, the narrative of trying to like kind of give people a framework of how to think about something. Though obviously for the sake of analysis, I think it's better to just tack those things on at the end after you've already established the independent traits and things for the most part. Like the best you can, I think that would be preferable. But because this is more so not really, at least so far, not much of an analysis video and more so kind of a talk, discussion, kind of like sharing my thoughts type of thing, I'm not going to blame what's the name of the content creator again? Double Back for Ammo. I'm not going to blame good old Double Back here for doing that. So I'm very curious where we're going to get this whole idea that, you know, Radigan is inspired by Loki. I'm not opposed to this idea. I'm curious where he's going to go with it to really connect it all. Or if this is going to be one of those theories where we work off the external reference that we've arbitrarily decided is in fact the, you know, the inspiration, and now we're going to just try to therefore backfill the inspiration as the, you know, the actual lore. It's going to be our substitute. I hope that's not going to be the case here. I prefer that wouldn't be, but we'll have to see how this actually turns out now. Also, for the sake of my sanity, I should probably make sure that I have a UI here so I can keep track of health pools when we're not going to be doing screenshots. Okay. Loki? Oh my god! I'm referenced, chat! They mentioned me! They talked about me on a video! I'm getting popular!
Asgard's problems. When summarized in full, understanding the
that completely
story
slipped
of
my
Loki
mind.
should cause any Elden Ring player to say, that sounds familiar. Because, as I elaborated in my previous video, Loki bears some striking similarities to Radigan.
I
will
missed the
link
video.
my previous
Skipping.
video in the description
Lore.
if you want to watch it, but I'll quickly list here the main similarities between Radagon and Loki, and hopefully you'll agree with me.
Okay,
There are many. Both are related to giants. Both married giant women. Both conceived 3 children.
Okay, so the idea is that, well, they have a vague giant connection because Ratigan has the red hair of a giant and Loki is the child of a giant, at least in some versions of the myth. Also, both married a giant woman. I don't know. That one's pretty tenuous. I mean, that one's pretty tenuous. I mean, this is one where I'm like, we might be jumping into artistic license here. Again, I'm not opposed to just saying that they're actually, you know, that size or accurate or whatever. It's just, this is one where I'm like, this one can be very arbitrary. Both conceived 3 children who turned into monsters. I guess if you really want to stretch, like, I don't know, would you consider Ronnie a monster because she goes inside a doll? Like, Radon isn't really, I guess Radon, you'd be like, oh, he gets so, like, he does look a little worse for wear with the Great Room, but I don't know. And I think Rykard's a fair one. I think it's fair to characterize Rykard. Ratigan is a couple inches taller. Hi, Loki! Hey, Nobre! You're just in time! Loki mentioned peak video.
With
I can't hate this
women
vid.
who turned into monsters. Both Loki and Ratigan may have shapeshifted and sired children with monsters. Both left their respective giant women and returned to the pantheon of the gods to...
I'll be honest, looking at this from an outsider's view, this kind of reads to me the same way as the whole similarities between the assassination of John F. Kennedy and Abraham Lincoln. Like, you could draw enough very vague and very broad similarities between 2 events and be like, oh my god, isn't that weird how the parallels and like the whole like mirror imaging of this and all that. It's like, yeah, sure, but like a lot of this is very broad and vague. Like, I would knock some of this off as just being like way too vague there. Like, I would want something like a little bit more like hyper specific. Right? Like, for example, Izalith being inspired by Izanami and Lilith. Well, the name literally is Izalith. So the name similarities of taking Lilith and Izanami are already there. And then you take some of the more admittedly broader similarities there, but the idea being like a mother of demons or something like, oh, being like the queen of the underworld. You know, like these things where you're like, okay, I can definitely see it because we have the name, which definitely shares the inspiration, combined with some broad similarities that are very, you know, kind of specific to these characters, but they're not something that's like so generic, right? Like, there are plenty of queens in the underworlds and things like that, right? Like, it's not something so important. And I definitely want to try to build Izalith's entire character around stories of Lilith and Izanami because of that. And I am concerned that this doesn't even meet that standard because, like, we're not even, like, we haven't even talked about, like, where the hell did the Ratigan name come from?
Area goddess. Both had 2 more ill-fated children with their new wives. My previous video goes into a lot more detail on each of these points, so do watch it if you have the time.
No, I think you made your points very clear.
The stories of Loki and Ratigan is that Loki became jealous of Balder and arranged for his death by exploiting a loophole in his godly vulnerability. Balder was the most beautiful and beloved of the gods, made immortal by his mother Frigg, who made everything in the universe promise not to hurt Balder, except for mistletoe. Loki shapeshifted into an old woman and cast a spell on Frigg to make her divulge this information. He then fashioned a spear out of mistletoe and deceived another god, the blind god Hoder, into throwing it at Balder, killing him. In Elden Ring, Ranni the Witch claims responsibility for a similar event, wherein she stole a fragment of the Rune of Death, which had been plucked from the Elden Ring by Queen Marika to make all her demigod children immortal, consequently blocking destined death for everyone in the lands between. Ranni forged the Black Knives and imbued them with the power of the Rune of Death, making them weapons capable of slaying a god. However, Ranni's story has some holes in it. The death of Marika's most beautiful and beloved son.
I'm curious what these holes are, so let's hear what exactly the issue is with what this what we're being told here.
Godwin the Golden is carried out by the Black Knife Assassins, who are all women of the Nox from Nokron, the Eternal City. But through her questline, Ranni demonstrates that she...
Well, again, I disagree with this assessment. I think they came from Celia. I think that's every circumstance there just works better with Celia. But hey, if we want to say broadly, that's basically Nokron. Sure, I suppose that would be the case. But like, Oh, that's not working. There we are. Eventually it works. Anyway, so already I'm curious if that's difference of opinion there is going to affect things. So let's see.
Has no idea how to enter Nokron, and neither do any of her minions like Bly.
Again, well, if the issue is that she never actually was going or in contact with Nokron, then yeah, no. Also, let's go with the assumption that the assassins were from Nokron. What would be the circumstances with which Ronnie might have not been able to go to Nokron, but actually recruited women who were from Nokron? Maybe if they were, I don't know, in Celia at the time, you know, a colony that Nokron is connected to, right? That also Kari is connected to. So like either way, like there are definitely explanations where Ronnie doesn't have to ever have visited, gone to, or found a way to enter Nokron and still meet with Nox from Nokron. We literally see Nox from presumably Nokron in Celia. So yeah, there's already a problem here. It's not really much of a hole. It's more so there's a gap. And you just have to kind of decide for yourself whether or not that gap is actually a hole in the narrative or not. And again, if we're giving, you know, charity to Ronnie's testimony, there's no reason to see that there's any problem with it. That would just tell us that we'd have to adjust our thinking on how it could be true. Again, this is an issue I think that really happens, is that, you know, we have this idea in our heads where it's like, oh, well, this you know, X and, you know, X leads to X and Y are true. Therefore, it could have only happened in Z. And it's like, no, there's different ways we can combine X or Y in order to kind of make them equate to that. It doesn't mean that we have to kind of force ourselves into a very strict way of thinking about it, right? We have to try to understand what the text is telling us, not try to superimpose what we want or what we believe the text to be telling us, right? I know that might be a little hard to kind of like grasp sometimes, but it's very important when you're doing historical and literary analysis, because it's very easy to kind of fall into that trap where it's like, oh, well, you know, this says that, therefore it must mean this. When it's like, no, that isn't always the case. You have to always be thinking about what the writer, or I guess in this case we have to say the developer, is trying to intend here. So let's see now where he's going to go with this, because already I see how this goes off the rails.
E.g. or Celuvus. Only by speaking to Sorceress Selin at the Waypoint Ruins do we learn that the hidden entrance to Nokron will be revealed by slaying Ronnie's brother, General Radon the Star Scourge.
Nothing here.
Ronnie isn't aware of any of this. So then, how did Ronnie enter Nokron, recruit the Black Knife Assassins, or supply...
And there it is. Again, where does it say Ronnie entered Nokron? See, this is the problem. Again, I don't even believe that they were necessarily from Nokron, but even if we were to assume that were in fact the case, we can see how there is really kind of this arbitrary decision of, oh, there's a hole here. It's like, no, you've decided there's a hole here. So I can already see a lot of problems with where this is going.
Them with the weapons they used to kill Godwin. At the Three Sisters, there is a portal to Noxtella, eternal city hidden in Rena's Rise. Some theorize that this is how Ronnie communicates with the Nox and the Black Knight Assassins. But in the game, this tower remains mysteriously blocked off by a blank seal until the Tarnished uses the Carrion inverted statue at the Carrion Study Hall and accesses the Divine Tower of Liurnia. This makes it unclear whether Ronnie had prior access to Rena's Rise and the portal to Noxtella. We find miniature Ronnie after teleporting to the Ainsel River area, a short distance away from Noxtella. By the way, if we speak to this doll repeatedly, then...
This is a little weird to me, because what would be the problem? Because it's Ronnie's body, and Ronnie's body can only be there in the inverted study hall after the events of the Night of the Black Knives. So, like, Ronnie would theoretically have access to the tower anytime before that if we're led to believe that the tower is actually being sealed away because of the inverted statue. Again, I don't know if that's the case, if we just should take that as, like, you know, a fluke of, you know, gameplay mechanics or something, or if we should actually be like, oh no, the magic was all tied together. But that one's a little curious to me. Just kind of curious why that's like a weird oddity there, because it seems like, yeah, it'd be pretty clear cut in that case. Oh well.
Ronnie tells us everything because, according to her, taking a miniature form hath loosened her tongue. But among all her admissions of guilt, she doesn't take responsibility for Godwin's death. She doesn't even mention him at all, nor does she confess.
I mean, why would she? She's already done so earlier in the same quest line. She confesses to being involved in the Night of the Black Knives. Like, why is she going to confess again to what she's already confessed? The entire point of that conversation is for her to share her thoughts and elaborate on her motives and reasonings for what she has been doing. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think she ever mentions how she was trying to get away from the two fingers up until that moment. I think it's the first time that she actually kind of talks about how it's all about the two fingers and her trying to stop it. Because, you know, we're essentially on our way in this part of the quest line to help her slay the two fingers. So it's kind of like, you know, relevant backstory, you know, just from a narrative perspective, if we were to look at it that way. So, like, yeah, I don't know. This doesn't seem that problematic to me. Maybe I'm really missing something here.
That's why he was the target of her plot, because perhaps he wasn't. My previous video theorizes that with so many similarities between Loki's and Radagon's backstories, and Loki's direct involvement in Baldur's death, it is entirely possible that Radagon has some connection to the Night of the Black Knives and Godwin's death.
It is entirely possible that Gwyn flew into the kiln of the First Flame riding an invisible pink unicorn. It is entirely possible. There's nothing in the game to say that it didn't happen. I'm just saying.
Given the plot holes apparent in Ronnie's recounting of her role
the non-existent plot holes,
my theory is that Radagon is likely the true architect of the death of Godwin the Golden. Today, I am returning
this is a side
to this
route, that's
theory
why.
again, but this time with documentation from within the game. This documentation will include item description text as well as deep dives into the lore of certain
maybe he just got off to a bad start and he's now actually going to give us the hard-hitting evidence
my
here.
Theory that Radagon is tied directly to the death of Godwin the Golden.
All right. Ooh, breadcrumbs.
The artist shacks are some of the most mysterious places in Elden Ring.
Maybe you're just trying to cover up your murder, Loki.
Apart in most cases. There are no NPCs around to explain them, but there are also no enemies nearby. They are odd places with odd vibes, avoided by everything in the lands between. The only person courageous or perhaps
is that really true? Like, I vaguely recall having a Lanedale Knight patrolling, literally literally patrolling down, walking from the shack. Like, again, like, you know, like, maybe you're like, well, he's not necessarily living in there, but it's like, well, he's pretty damn close. He's kind of hanging around there. So, like, I don't know if that's really true. Plus, don't we have a lot of lore about the Wandering Painter and the guy? I mean, he's kind of dead, and the stuff is kind of abandoned, so, like, I don't know.
Stupid enough to venture to these places is the Tarnished. The artist shack in Limgrave is the first one we are likely to come across in our journey. It houses the Homing Instinct painting, making this likely the first painting we find. This painting is the work of a wandering artist, said to have captured the landscape scene during the last moments of those welcomed into death's embrace. The soul of the painter and vestiges of the dead's last moments can be discovered by visiting the locations depicted even now. The artwork depicts an actual location in Limgrave, where the soul of the painting's artist briefly appears and points to the Church of Pilgrimage and the minor Erd tree on the Weeping Peninsula. The artist drops the incantation scarab, an item worn like a mask over the face, which reduces the FP cost of incantations but increases the damage taken. The description ends with, as a scarab approaches death, it abandons its rolled treasure and stretches its wings wide for the long journey to its home nest. This is one way of explaining the painting's title. However, the mention of the scarab's death is interesting, partly because of what we find in the region the artist points to, which I'll elaborate on momentarily, but also because the incantation scarab is one of 5 similar masks. The incantation scarab is the only one of these items with a third paragraph of description, a paragraph that leaves us with the final impression of flying toward the area area the artist was pointing towards. If one stands in the artist's position and faces the same direction, one can draw a straight line down the middle and connect two locations, the Church of Pilgrimage and the Tombsword Catacombs, directly below the minor Erd Tree of the Weeping Peninsula. Many Elden Ring lore theorists and websites believe the Homing Instinct painting is referring specifically to the Tower of
So where do I begin here? An interesting connection to be made with trying to say that the way that the painter is pointing is supposed to be a reflection of the scarab. I'm not sure if I buy that. I'm pretty sure the idea with the scarab is just to kind of tell us about what the local buried people had, because that's what we see with consistent with all the wandering painter stuff, is that generally it's some item associated with the dead. So I'm not sure if I would fully buy this idea that the scarab is being intended to point in the direction when the painter is clearly just pointing to the collection of graves outside the Dragonburnt ruins, which would be implicitly the graveyard for the settlement that became, well, Dragonburnt ruins. I'm really struggling to go with this idea. Like, the scarab might tell us about the culture being related to incantations and stuff, which, again, what big shocker with the people there. It could be telling us, you know, sort of about, like, you know, maybe it's some burial practice to have the scarabs maybe brought there because, you know, the idea is, like, you know, they're kind of like, you know, dying and leaving things and moving on, right, or stuff like that. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of other options to explore. I'm not sure if I'd go with this pointing thing first. But anyway, now let's see what he's talking about with Homing Instinct.
Turn in the Weeping Peninsula, because a teleporter chest is located here, one that transports the player to the Divine Tower Bridge in Lanedale, Royal Capital. Though entirely credible, this theory doesn't add up, because the artist who drops the incantation scarab is pointing directly south, whereas the Tower of Return is located farther to the southwest. The incantation scarab being gold...
Again, wouldn't Homing Instinct be perfectly fitting to the idea that maybe the scarab, if we're trying to go with this idea that it's the scarab's homing instinct, like maybe trying to home in or whatever, is going to the graveyard or is trying to go back to the nest? Like, again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if the idea that this noble is pointing us down all the way to Weeping Peninsula really holds water, because again, we have the painter doing these types of poses and stuff all the time, and it's always consistent with whatever the painting is actually depicting. So this is just, I think, a little bizarre to me.
Might also be significant. Incantations include a wide range of faith-based spells, including those of the Crucible, the Erd Tree, and the Golden Order fundamentalists, Dragon Cult and Dragon Communion incantations, Bestial incantations, Blood Oath, Frenzied Flame, and even Godslayer incantations.
Okay.
Therefore, the color of the incantation scarab could have been any of a range of colors from white to yellow, orange, or dark red. But it is specifically gold in color, matching the Golden Order, or quite possibly matching Godwin the Golden. The reason I say this is because of what we find if we explore the area the artist pointed at. Traveling on horseback to the area, we are likely to come across...
Am I crazy? Are we just gonna ignore? Right there. The graves right here. It's right there. Now maybe you'll be like, but look, see, it's framing with the Mitre Erd Tree. But I'm like, but these are the graves. These are the dead. Like, why are we trying to go all the way to Weeping Peninsula for the answer seems to be self-explanatory. It's right there. This is getting a little odd here.
Traveling on horseback to the area, we are likely to come across the Church of Pilgrimage first. Before we arrive there, we are likely to encounter a group of wandering nobles or pilgrims traveling to the church. For a long time, I believe these nobles were here to explain the name of the church. However, I now believe this may be misdirection. There may be another reason for the name relating to the exile of Godfrey and the Tarnished. tarnished. By resting at the site of grace at the Church of Pilgrimage, we can optionally hear spoken echoes of Queen Miraca recited by Melanie. The words appear to be a continuation of the speech that Miraca started at the third church, where she told Godfrey and the Golden Army that they would become tarnished, be driven from the lands between, wage war in a land afar, and die.
Yep.
Then, after thy death, I will give back what I once claimed, return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the golden ring, grow strong in the face of death. Warriors of my lord, Lord Godfrey.
With these words, Miraca is foretelling the future, also known as prediction or prophecy. Keep this word in mind for later.
Okay.
This church was probably the last stop of Godfrey and the Golden Army before they left the lands between. The ships that the Tarnished...
or at least the general area. Again, I'm not always going to be like, oh no, well, this specific church, because there's the Miraca Church right across from it, right? So I think that there's a good case to say, like, you know, the speech is just necessarily, you know, in the area. As I've also pointed out previously, I'm pretty sure the idea with the Church of Pilgrimage is because it's where the pilgrimage ends, going up all the way from the Bellum Church. The idea being is that fundamentalists, which we see the golden centipedes at both of these churches, essentially travel down, mostly down the highway from the Bellum Church all the way down to Weeping Peninsula, and then take the by road up to the Pilgrimage Church. The idea being, like, you get to go on the journey of Radigan when he goes from Golden Hero to Elden Lord at the end, right? These are two major locations where he was, and both kind of were seminal in deciding his story, right? His epic tale. So, of course, you're going to have religious people who want to see, like, you know, it'd be like doing a pilgrimage to, like, you know, I don't know, like the following the life of St. Peter. So you go from, like, you know, his fishing village all the way to Rome when he, you know, he's like Pope and finishing his ministry or something, right? It'd be a very similar idea because, you know, oh, he's the leader of the church or something like that, right? Like, so there's I mean, I feel like we're zeroing in on the wrong thing here with the Church of Pilgrimage now, because the idea is like, oh, the pilgrimage has to relate to Godfrey. I mean, kind of, insofar as it kind of hints at Radigan being here for seemingly no other reason than because Merica was there and doing the whole tarnish thing, which would make you ask about why Radigan had to show up for this. And, you know, I have my own position on this I cover in the Long March. So again, we'll see if he addresses this at all.
Southwest edge of the continent. Several of these ships didn't make it far, however, as many of them are wrecked just offshore by some unknown calamity that struck them on departure.
It's called a fog.
Inside the Church of Pilgrimage, we see that this is one of...
I mean, it's made very clear that that there's a sea of fog surrounding the lands between, and that this fog is very likely responsible for making it very difficult for sailors and the like. Because correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure one of our possible backgrounds is one of these sailors who try and fail oftentimes. I forget the exact wording, but there's kind of this impression that, you know, a lot of people have tried going to the lands between, but very few succeed necessarily. So I'm not sure what we're trying to insinuate here. Like, this seems like pretty standard, all things considered. There's nothing else I'm seeing in this room, right? Nothing in the back here even. No, actually there is a passage. We'll try the passage first. Anyway, back to it.
Of the churches where Radagon has replaced the usual statue of Merica with his own likeness.
Okay.
We discussed in my previous video how Radagon had his own separate personality from Merica, how he wanted to be worshipped and to be a god like her, and how Merica even acknowledged this in her spoken echoes that Melina recites.
Wants to be a god like her? I mean, he's her other half. I mean, we can argue whether or not godhood is, like, segregated between them, but, like, you know, effectively he is still her, right? I think when we get to Merica's words, I think the point being made is more so about Merica trying to be like, no, I'm the one with the pants in this relationship. I'm the god here, not you, right? Trying to kind of just assert herself as, like, you know, the prime half, right? The prime personality, the prime consciousness, however you want to put it. I don't know if they necessarily have separate souls or anything, but, like, at the very least, we could say they have distinct consciousnesses. And in that context, I think it's not really unfair to say that Ratigan would technically also be the god. I mean, he definitely has the same resistances as demigods and stuff, so he's at the very least has that going for him, right? Yeah, I don't know about this idea that, you know, like, Ratigan has like this huge god complex and he needs to be worshipped, right? Like, everything about him is more so about being complete. And so to the extent that he wants to be worshipped, it's because he wants to kind of make sure that, you know, he has his full total distinct and separate identity from Marika. Well, of course, still, of course, originally and being in effect Marika. So I wouldn't be surprised if he would want to be worshipped as a god, because that's what Marika would want. So like, I don't know. It's a very nuanced topic, I feel, to get into, and I don't know if like why would this be like a major thing for Ratigan when he's Elden Lord and he's already he's already married and he's only got like a few churches to him, so it's not like he's even getting worshipped like more than her or trying to compete with her, it seems like. I don't know. There's a lot of things that I want to dissect in that idea, and I'm not sure.
Bedchamber in
not sure how I feel about this.
Ratigan's statue, we find
I do think he wishes to be the god.
But just to the right, we can find
I'd have to think on that more.
This item is described as kept as a fetish by Golden Order fundamentalists, especially the hunters of those who live in death. One such hunter of those who live in death is D, Hunter of the Dead, who we can meet outside Summonwater Village. If we speak to him again after defeating the Tibia Mariner located there, he details why these items are so important to hunters like himself.
I spotted the mark of the centipede here in the village. An ill-omened symbol that should not be. Someone or something threatens the sanctity of the Golden Order. It must be eradicated.
So, for hunters like D, the Golden Centipede represents the presence of those who live in death and a threat to the Golden Order. We do not find any Golden Centipedes here ourselves, but we can assume that D already found and collected them. What we do find here are these strange roots with
no? It's a fundamentalist. What's the word? Fetish. And it goes back to seemingly Marika with the Minor Erdtree Church and stuff, too. At the very least, the general concept of what they were exploring was. I don't think, like, the centipedes that we see desiccated have any connection to those who live in death in and of themselves. I wouldn't be surprised if they literally are just ordinary centipedes. So, like, yeah, I'm not sure if I'd go that far. I think that's why he involves himself with Mikola, to raise him as like a male god. Ooh, that'd be interesting to kind of dive into their relationship more. That's a cool angle to explore in the future. Anyway, so yeah, I don't think there's anything. It's also a bit weird because D kind of implies that like he hasn't been at the village yet. Like he's like just at the outskirts dealing with it. Like he assumes, like he has his suspicions essentially about a mariner, right? And it's something because he has experience, so it's not something like he's not wrong about it, right? Like it's a fair assumption for him to make. Plus he has, you know, the plot to help him. But the point is that I don't think there's any reason to believe that D has already somehow gone through the entire area and cleaned it out of all these centipedes and yet done nothing about the mariner. Like, that seems like really odd. Like, you have all these skeletons in the mariner and you haven't cleared them out already, even though that's like your main job and your big thing you're really like amped about. I don't know. That seems very odd to me.
Spines. The Tibia Mariner encountered in Summonwater Village and all the others throughout the game drop an item called Deathroot. This item's description has the following third paragraph. On the night of the dire plot, the stolen rune of death enabled the first death of a demigod. Later, the rune of death spread across the lands between through the underground roots of the Great Tree, sprouting in the form of Deathroot. So, although we must search elsewhere for the connection, the golden centipedes at the Church of Pilgrimage are connected to those who live in death and Deathroot. If we wander outside...
Indirectly, yes? Again, this is very odd to kind of make the connection here. Because again, you have these fetishes, which can be used to create a bunch of holy stuff, and is meant to represent this idea. Because again, it helps if you understand how centipedes are basically the animal of corruption or impurity, however you want to translate it, dirtiness, filth, you know, this idea of like sort of spiritual, yeah, we'll call it spiritual filth, right? In Japanese Shinto culture, this idea that you are corrupted, right? That you have been sullied in some way, and this animal sort of kind of embodies and encapsulates. And if you see like, you know, Japanese centipedes, those things are freaking huge, man. Like those things are terrifying. So this idea that like, you know, the centipede is this. Oh, well, that was an easy death. Anyway, the idea that these centipedes are kind of representative of like sort of like the corruption in the order, and the idea to do it is to kind of bring it in line with the order by desiccating it in gold and stuff like that. Like that I completely understand this idea of like trying to cleanse impurities or whatever and trying to make them part of the whole and all that stuff. So sort of like kind of, again, this idea of having a proper death and all that stuff that gets spouted by the fundamentalists, the fanatics among them at least. So that's interesting. But like, now we're trying to say that because there are those who live in death in the graveyard next to it, and there's centipede things there, that therefore they're emerging because of it, then why are they already gold? That seems very odd when we don't see that with the skeletons in most cases. Again, the only time we get golden skeletons would be specifically in the Sun Capital graveyard.
And death root. If we wander outside the Church of Pilgrimage to the west, we find a graveyard from which arise those who live in death. Now we understand why the golden centipedes are found here. But why are those who live in death interested in this church, where spoken echoes indicate Lyrica relayed a prophecy to her Lord Godfrey and her golden army? Why does it seem like those who live in death are attempting to take over this church, where Radagon is prominently featured? More items of interest appear in the graveyard, including the gilded iron shield, looted from a corpse sitting on top of a grave. As the description reads, though the gold leaf is peeling and the effect is slight, it still boosts holy damage negation. Those who live in death are weak against holy damage, and so this shield would be perfect for one of the undead. In my opinion, this particular shield being found at this particular spot is hinting at the concept of protecting those who live in death.
Could that be the idea? It's a generic shield, if I recall. Like, isn't it something that a bunch of generic soldier enemies throughout the games have? I don't remember if it's a drop or anything, but correct me if I'm wrong. Is that a shield that you can see at least other enemies wielding? I don't remember how common it is. Oh, this is gonna be hard. I can already tell. Whoop. There we go. Oh, there we go. We're out. Anyway, I don't know. I feel like, do we consider this a fall death? It's always a fall death. It's not generic? Okay, so it is special at least. Yeah, because like my first thought would be, it feels like a Godric thing where the gold is there, but it's falling down, and there's this general idea of being tarnished, you know, being tarnished in color, not living up to true gold, right? There's this, you know, again, the idea of being tarnished and tarnished is that you are the faded, right? The color has faded from you, the golden color. So the idea that you have this kind of gold and stuff that's kind of peeling or whatever, that seems very consistent with that theme. I don't know if I would tie it specifically to those who live in death, but I definitely don't want to shut the door on that idea either, because I could see it even serving a dual purpose maybe. But even if we were to discard the other possibilities and just like focus on the living dead angle, like maybe it is interesting that they chose to put it in, like, you know, a graveyard with, like, the skeletons walking around. Though I guess most of the graveyards we come across do end up having skeletons in them, so maybe that's not that unique. It could be coincidence there. Some skeletons will have the script shield, though, I guess. That is true, but it'll be it's specifically, as I recall, in the... oh, I forget what the name is, but the one on Storm Hill, the catacombs on Storm Hill, and then you also have the situation where it's the hero's grave, I think is the one. The Ariza hero's grave has the other one. So from my memory, unreliable as it is, I do feel like it would make, I do feel like it's we have more of a historical basis for why they're wielding it. I don't think the idea is supposed to be that the skeletons in those places are randomly finding or grabbing two fingers shields, rather than those shields are already there and they're just kind of wielding what's on hand, right? Because they're supposed to be soldiers probably from Godfrey's old wars. There we go. Perfect. So yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this idea that this would be connected to, like, oh, the skeletons are trying to defend themselves from holiness. Because it's not even like it's on a skeleton, it's on a regular corpse. So it's not even like the idea that, oh, they're picking it up and using it or whatever, right? Like if it was just like left like on a pile of bones or something, I think, or a skeleton or whatever, I wouldn't really have a problem with this idea. But the way that they've set this up, it's definitely kind of seems more like it's incidental. Again, on a thematic area, maybe you could argue, okay, like, you know, logically in the lore, yes, it's connected to Godwin and all that stuff. It has nothing really to do with those who live in death, but thematically, it's talking about this idea of gold peeling or whatever. And maybe you can make an argument that, oh, get it, because like Godwin the Golden, but he's like, you know, he's been corrupted and decayed or whatever, so the gold is kind of like, you know, peeling away and all that stuff and revealing like this ugliness underneath. It's also where we get the first mention about this idea of unsightly spawn in regards to soulless demigods. So that kind of would help making that type of case there, right? Because we have so much there related to the assassinations of the demigods indirectly, that kind of cumulatively could maybe be trying to build a case there, right? Like I'm really trying to give this guy's idea its due, because I do think that there's at least something there worth discussing. I just, again, like I said, I do think it might just be as simple as the Godric connection, and it's more so either balance wise or incidental or some other arbitrary reason for why the shield was placed there specifically. But anyway, let's release some more. I want to see where this goes.
A concept we'll hear more about later in the game from Fia the Deathbed Companion, who is on a quest deeply tied to Godwin the Golden.
Okay.
Also in this graveyard, a single crucifix is erected, where a single unfortunate tarnished hangs, beneath whom a blood grease lies on the ground. Blood grease is crafted from a combination of blood rose and root resin, which has the following description: secreted from the roots of the great tree, but can also be found near trees on the surface. The roots of the great tree were once linked to those of the oak tree, or so they say, and it is for this reason catacombs are built around great tree roots. As stated earlier, the soul of the painter of the Homing Instinct painting also points us toward the minor Erd tree in Weeping Peninsula. Under this Erd tree is the tomb's word catacombs, in which we encounter many of those who live in death. We can also find a large amount of death root on the walls and ceilings, and upon defeating the cemetery shade boss inside a chamber full of great tree roots, we receive the spirit ashes of Lutel the Headless, leader of the mausoleum soldiers who protect the nearby walking mausoleum, which houses another one of the other demigods killed on the night of the Black Night.
I don't know if it was necessarily this one specifically, because they make a point of how this one was resurrected, and we don't really see much evidence of that here with the Wandering Mausoleum. So I have no idea if Lutel is actually connected to this one specifically. Now, granted, we don't see any knight other than Lutel at this location. So maybe the idea is like this is the night there was some significant progress, but then it's a little weird because then the other ones aren't really showing any different signs that would tell them that they're not, but they still have their knights around. So like, yeah, this one I will admit, I'm not sure if I fully understand Lutel. I could be missing something here. So let's see what we get here.
Referred to by the spirit at the Church of Pilgrimage as America's unwanted child. Interesting fact, the southern doorway of
again, the term here is otoshiko, which is a term that I like to translate as spawn, but you could translate it as again, historically referred to a noble's bastard child, you know, like the illegitimate, you know, kind of, you know, definitely unwanted, but generally refers to a fallen or dropped, you know, child, more literally. And this idea is being that the child, you know, it's sort of like, you know, it's not on the right path, right? Like, you know, it's kind of sort of fallen off, right? It's no longer at a great place because, you know, it's illegitimate. And this, of course, ties into the idea of being unwanted so far as that, you know, generally, especially in the case of nobles bastard stuff, you don't want them. Now, it should be known that this term is used very generically as kind of like another synonym for like a monster or something in fantasy works and stuff like that. So it's, especially in Miyazaki games, you will very rarely, if ever, in fact, I don't think I can think of a single example where it's actually being used to refer to its traditional historical definition. It's usually used in a very much like a literary form, like say with the abyssal spawns of Dark in Dark Souls 2 with like Nashandra and her quote-unquote sisters, or say what do we got, like the kindred of Rot are another example of this, the spawn, etc., right? So in Elden Ring, so like we have these a lot of these cases where it's like these are, you know, you have this term being used to describe the various like sort of like entities and things that generally are kind of something where it's like, you know, this is a bad consequence of something, and generally you don't like your bad consequences of something, so you reject those things. And that's generally the mentality that you should have whenever you see this term pop up. And I'm not, again, I just want to kind of clarify this because this seems to be the idea with what we're talking about with Marika's child, is that, well, it's a soulless demigod. It is something that is, you know, completely defiant and existing outside of the Golden Order without the Rune of Death and all that stuff. So it's something where I wouldn't look too deep into this where we're trying to be like, oh no, Marika didn't want her children, she actually wanted them assassinated or something like that. That's not really the point being made.
Almost perfectly with the entrance of the tombs or the catacombs. If the land were more even, you could walk straight from the church into the tomb. On a stone column just west of the minor Erd tree in the Tombsword catacombs, we find a corpse holding the Eclipse Crest Heater shield.
Okay.
A medium-sized metal shield that bears the symbol of the eclipse and the following description. The sun in eclipse is said to be the symbol of the wandering mausoleum where the soulless demigods slumber. But this body doesn't face the wandering mausoleum. It faces the fourth church of Marika. The only unique feature of this church is that it is always guarded by mausoleum soldiers.
Another one.
If you knock down the nearby walking mausoleum and stop its endless pacing, the mausoleum soldiers in the valley all vanish, no longer bound to their eternal duty to protect the demigod within. However, at the fourth church, these soldiers still stand guard here, and another trio patrols the dirt path to the church. They are actively protecting this church, where a statue of Marika still stands. Why do they protect this church and not the walking mausoleum? And why?
I mean, they're already protecting it.
The Marika statue in the Church of Pilgrimage, and not this one, the only other church on the Weeping Peninsula, only a short distance away. Are the mausoleum knights posted here on special duty, trying to prevent the same sacrilegious statue replacement that already occurred at the nearby Church of Pilgrimage? Or are
Again, I haven't seen his last video, which I sure is where he tries to make this argument, but yeah, I don't think there was some sacrilegious statue replacement. I'm sorry, I just don't. Like, you have Marika churches, and then you have Radigan building his own churches. What's wrong with that? Like, are we really trying to say that somehow Radigan's like, oh, you know, on the down low, without my wife knowing, my wife is never going to be able to find out that I'm actually throwing her statue away? I mean, come on, the church is literally right next to another Marika church. Are we trying to say that Marika just had two churches, like just literally right next to each other? For what purpose? Like, come on, there's even some distance between the Church of Repose and the first Marika church all the way up on the mountaintops. Like, come on.
Trying to prevent the spread of those who live in death, in the way that Godwin's followers have already spread to the Church of Pilgrimage, surrounding it with gravestones from which they emerge, golden centipedes, and other
Again, I'm pretty sure this graveyard has to relate to the old pilgrimage, where, again, you have all these pilgrims, they go on a long journey, and, well, let's be honest, not everyone making a journey long distance from all the way across the continent is going to end up surviving for one reason or another. You know, some people end up dying, whatever the cause is. And then, you know, you're going to bring their bodies there so they complete their pilgrimage and they get to be buried there as like kind of like a final, you know, kind of like a final, what's the word? Grace, I suppose you could say, like a final wishes being fulfilled or what have you, right? Just something to show their respect and all that. So again, I don't know what we're getting at here with this whole...
vaguely tied to the story of Godwin. But the corpse holding the Eclipse Crest heater shield might not be looking at this church. They could instead be looking at the Weeping Ever jail beside the fourth church.
Are we not considering that the corpse is kind of just being placed in the general direction of the mausoleum? It's not necessarily pinpoint accurate to exactly the church or the Ever jail or any of that. Like, are we not considering the idea that it's just kind of be like, okay, I'm putting it down in the general direction of this because this is where not just the mausoleum is wandering around, which admittedly doesn't really have a fixed place, but also the soldiers who are kind of in the general vicinity around it? I feel like we're kind of ignoring this part and we're trying to really hyperfixate on this for a more conspiratorial angle.
Inside this Ever jail is an ancient hero of Zamor, a boss version of a knight of Zamor, commonly encountered in the mountaintops of the Giants, far to the north. These knights were said to have been enemies of the Fire Giants, and likely would have accompanied Godfrey and Marika, who is also Radagon, on their march north to defeat the Fire Giants. When defeated, this enemy drops...
I should also state that I do not think that Marika and Radagon existed when this conflict, or this alliance with the Zamor was happening during the Giant War. I feel like at earliest, Radagon would have emerged after the war, but, you know, carry on.
Radagon's Scar Seal, which many theorize is the actual eye of King Consort Radagon himself, representing his lifelong duty as one chosen.
No, I think we could say very definitively this is not the case, especially when we see a very similar Scar Seal, or, you know, just general Elden Rune Seal type thing with, what's his face? Mesmer. So I think we can say very definitively it is not, in fact, the actual eye of Radagon, in the same way that we don't get the actual eye of Marika when we get the Marika seals. I did not know this was a talking point, but I guess I shouldn't be surprised. All right, moving on.
By the gods. Why is this ancient hero of the Golden Order's war against the Giants imprisoned on the Weeping Peninsula in an Ever jail, a device which is quite clearly derived from the magic technology of the Eternal Cities? Why is he carrying...
I don't think I would agree with this. Again, I don't know if I would agree that I would say the Ever jails are derived from Eternal City technology. Like, maybe, but like... I feel like it would have to belong to either ancient Civ technology or something more ancient than them. Like, I don't see Eternal City when I look at that, I admit. Definitely not. So, yeah. I don't know if I would agree with that in the first place. And as to the actual issue of the Knight in Zamor, I've talked about this in my Long March, probably because, again, we have evidence that some of the ancient heroes of Zamor who fought in the Giant War continued to join Godfrey, probably out of respect for what he had contributed to their campaign against the Giants. And so, oh, that's a lot of damage. They would essentially be asked to they essentially be asked to essentially continue joining him and serving as part of his army, and then one of these would end up joining him all the way down south and then would be banished as one of the Tarnished, which of course, as we see, didn't go over so well with this guy when it finally came time to leave. That is a lot of damage. Anyway, so I'm not entirely convinced by this idea that there's really anything that conspiratorial, because, like, really all it takes is the Zamor comes down here, they're about to leave. We know at least one boat didn't leave from the anchor. Maybe he'll bring this up. And that the idea would be that the Zamor stayed behind, probably had to violently resist, right? Which directly or indirectly threatens Marika, and then Marika just brings Radagon out. Radagon shows up, and then he kind of like brings this guy to heel, because as we can see from all evidence, Marika's not really a fighter compared to her hero husband. And like I said before, with the Church of Pilgrimage, everything, it sort of kind of builds up this justification for why Marika's be like, oh, you're so dreamy, I'm gonna marry you now, and all, you know, the political, you know, public perception excuse.
A totem of Lord Radagon that might be one of his actual eyes. What great crime did this ancient hero commit? What offense might he have given Lord Radagon to wind up here? The eclipse in Elden Ring is a vague concept that won't be revealed in full until we later reach Castle Sol, which just happens to be in the mountaintops of the Giants, home of the aforementioned Knights of Zamor. The eclipse is the symbol of Castle Sol, represented on its banners, but according to the talking spirits within Castle Sol, the eclipse also indicates either the timing or the nature of a ceremony Miquella conducted at Castle Sol to restore the soul of a dead slumbering in the walking mausoleum just outside. It's possible that if Miquella had been successful, that he would have discovered how to restore Godwin's soul to his body and undo the curse mark carved into his back. But the eclipse failed. In Stormvale Castle, we encounter a spellbound named Sorcerer Rogier. We can summon him in the fight against Market, the Fell Omen. Later, we can speak to him in a small church and learn Glintstone battle arts from him. As we continue exploring, if we follow the upper level in the northwest part of the castle, we find a message left by Rogier that includes a hologram. Rogier is standing facing southeast, back into the castle. His message states that we can find what we're looking for nearby.
Looked away!
However, this might not be a message to us. This might be Rogier leaving a note for himself. Because if we draw a straight line in the direction he is facing, we can see that he is looking directly at the artifact he is seeking under Stormvale Castle. In the burial chamber beneath Stormvale Castle, we encounter a lesser ulcerated tree spirit. In the area beyond this encounter, we find a bizarre-looking face with deathroot growing from it. If we stand on this face and match the angle of its eyes, we find ourselves looking at the location where Rogier left his message on the balcony. Nearby, we see a bloodstain. Something we usually see only in network mode, marking where other players have died. But this bloodstain also appears offline. When activated, it appears to show Rogier die in a manner that is consistent with Death. This status effect also appears to have been wielded by Godwin the Golden in life, as noted in the description of the Death Lightning Dragon Cult incantation. A corpse near the giant face can be looted to find the Prince of Death's pustule, an accessory that raises vitality and helps prevent death. The second paragraph of this item's description reads, "It is said that this pustule came from the visage of the Prince of Death,
that damage.
who used to be called Godwin. As for Stead of the Demigods, it said he's buried deep under the capital at the Erd Tree's roots." Indeed, much later in the game, we might have the opportunity to visit the deeper depths, where another walking mausoleum prowls the nameless Eternal City. Where mausoleum knights and soldiers guard another slumbering demigod within, where we can ascend by riding along the great tree roots to the summit, where we find the massive corpse of Godwin the Golden, now known as the Prince of Death, dead in soul but living in body, having grown into a grotesque monster fused to the Erd Tree roots, spreading Deathroot to all corners of the world. His face now looks like a version of the face we see under Stormvale.
So far, pretty conventional account of everything.
Rogier discovered
a little long-winded, maybe.
Manifestation of the Prince of Death. In a room in Stormvale that is sometimes easy to miss, we can find another large painting titled Prophecy. This room is located directly below the church where we first speak to Rogier, and it is guarded by a literal guard dog, as well as an omen, an enemy most commonly encountered in the sewers under Lanedale Royal Capital, where omen children are condemned to live out their lives, shunned away out of sight by the Golden Lord, who despise anything with horns. Why is an omen from the capital slumbering here in Stormvale, with the only hound dog in the entire stage blocking access to a painting? But more importantly, the painting's title, Prophecy, refers directly to the Church of Pilgrimage, where we heard spoken echoes of America divulging a prophecy about how the Tarnished would return to the lands between. After viewing the painting and returning to the Church of Pilgrimage, we can go a little northwest of the structure to find the soul of the painter. He is looking northwest at Stormvale in the Chapel of Anticipation, where we, the Tarnished, first returned into the world when summoned by grace, and also where a visage of Godwin, now Prince of Death, appears in the burial chamber far underground. The painter disappears, dropping the Warhawk ashes, which is the spirit of a Stormvale Warhawk. The description of this item states, with its lord vanquished and its wings wounded, the hawk perished as it solemnly gazed at its former home.
There we go.
Unlike the incantation scarab, the Warhawk was unable to follow its homing instinct. But I think the real clue we're supposed to take from this is for us to return or fly back to Stormvale and look for more clues linking the evidence found around the Church of Pilgrimage to the visage of Godwin in the burial chamber.
This is getting a little string theory, I will say, because there's a lot of, again, I think the biggest problem is that we're really stretching to make the Wandering Artist try to be like pointing or trying to highlight more than it is. He's saying that because Death Lightning says it is Godwin's lightning, but obviously it's just been corrupted. Well, yeah, that was kind of the thing that I found very odd when he was talking about the lightning, because I'm like, why are we trying to connect that with the current, like, Godwin? But I mean, okay, fine, if we're trying to say that Godwin was always using death or something, I guess, but that kind of begs a lot more questions that he kind of went unaddressed. Yeah, thanks for the congrats, I appreciate it. We have so much in terms of crap too. I think it's time we return. So before we hit the conclusions, here's a problem with when we're talking about prophecy, and I know he told us to keep it in mind, and I figured he was going to bring that back. There is a high likelihood that the prophecy painting is a mix-up. That they accidentally got the names switched up. Because I don't know why, but the prophecy painting and the, what was it called again? I forget the title off the top of my head. Let me look this one up. It wasn't Homing Instinct, obviously, but, Elden Ring portraits or paintings. It was... No, these are for the DLC and stuff like that. There's Prophecy here. Flightless Bird, that's the one, yeah. So, I don't know why, but for some reason, in the game files, even though these paintings are far apart geographically, they're actually next to each other in the files. Now, obviously, the name Flightless Bird is much more appropriate for the painting that rewards us with the ashes of a hawk whose wings were clipped, making it, in effect, a quote-unquote flightless bird, right? At least in the abstract. The other point being, another painting, in turn, the prophecy painting name, is much more appropriate for the painting over in Lingdell, which leads us to the Dominula village, where we acquire the, what was it? The cardinal sin of flame or whatever it's called, or like, you know, like great cardinal sin, whatever. The point being is that, you know, that talks about the prophecy of flame that will burn the Erd tree and all that stuff. So the point is, it's highly likely that there was just a terrible mistake by whoever was inputting the names in the files and ended up mixing the two up there, and it just never got caught. So we kind of end up in this very hilarious situation now where the prophecy painting has no connection to a prophecy all the way down in Stormvale, and the flightless bird painting has no real connection to flightless birds all the way up in Lingdell. So I just kind of want to point that out because it feels like he was trying to go somewhere with that, and maybe he's going to now try to bring it up in his conclusions here. But this definitely, it's a very important little detail that I think gets very much overlooked. And again, I think it's because he's focusing so hard on trying to be like, oh, the painter is trying to show us some secrets or whatever. It's like, no, he's just painting where, like, where the people died or what they see from where they died. Like, it's not that deep. It really is not. I think the overreach on the Wandering Painter is probably the biggest death knell to this theory, because it, like, again, some of the other stuff you're like, okay, it doesn't help you or whatever, but I think the fact that we started out with essentially trying to talk about breadcrumbs with the scarab and all that stuff for this painting, Homing Instinct, I don't think that was good. I think it kind of leads you down some weird rabbit holes. Also, good to see you, Birdie.
So,
I'm doing great listening to this.
Spitting facts at you for a while. What does it all mean? I think that
I think for the last half, you were talking mostly about facts for sure when we got to it, but it was basically just a basic attestation of the attestation of the stuff involving the Godwin quest line leading us to Deep Root Depths. The stuff before that, some of it I don't know if I would call them facts. Maybe in the most strictest sense, like, you know, hey, you know, there's something truthful being said here, but like some of the angles and stuff, it's like I think we need a little bit of qualifiers here.
Elden Ring, like Bloodborne and Dark Souls before it, favors environmental storytelling over long expository cutscenes.
Sure.
The history of Elden Ring has been shattered and fragmented, just like the Elden Ring, Marika, and Radagon, and the lands between.
I guess?
We can only find some of the pieces, and we must use clues from the various mythologies of our world, as well as our imaginations, to tie it all together. So...
No.
Let me stand close.
You could just use the game. You don't need the mythologies of our world to substitute for actual game lore. I'm sorry to say that just no. I do not. I think this is a very dangerous mindset to have, because this is essentially saying I'll just, you know, plug in anything I see in mythology that I can vaguely draw some sort of parallel between, and then kind of substitute that, and then try to make the lore fit in with it. It's a very backwards way to go about any type of analysis. Like, you're essentially trying to work from your conclusion to do it. Again, this is why when I do mention external sources, I do try to make them a bit of an afterthought for the most part, because again, they're generally not that relevant. The inspirations tend to be very thin, very broad, and very much kind of just there because the author needed a name, so may as well pick a name that has some meaning in some broad sense in order you get a wide variety of creative fantasy, you know, not denominations, but, you know, monikers for everybody. You can solve every Souls game with the games themselves. Yeah, exactly the point. Like, sure, do you need some background of understanding of concepts? Yes. It's very helpful to understand medieval European history, to understand the concept of knights and kings and feudal societies and peasants and all that stuff. Sure, that's something where you're going to have to bring external knowledge into the game, because you need to understand concepts and things that are being mentioned and portrayed within the game. It's helpful to have that cultural background, right? It's helpful to have some cultural background on the Japanese language and Japanese culture to help you inform you on some of the maybe shorthand that is being used in terms of broader thematic points, like I mentioned with the centipedes earlier. So, like, there's certain things that, sure, it is useful for you to be aware of broader concepts and ideas, but I don't think you need to now go scouring entire fictional or real life mythologies, right? Because obviously Miyazaki relies on a lot of like fighting fantasy and stuff for his inspirations as well, right? Like it's not just like Norse or Egyptian mythology or something like that. So like you don't need to go scouring into them. It's nice, it's cool to look into and stuff. And who knows, if you're like someone who's like really struggling on something, it may just like give you that thing to give you that eureka moment. You're like, oh, I never thought about this way or whatever. But it's ultimately secondary. You really don't need it. Like, if I took Abyssal Archive and I cut out all my references to anything that maybe wasn't Demon Souls, because like a story and stuff, it's definitely nice to have all the like the Demon Souls references. But even then, I think you could even cut out all references to Demon Souls, and the Dark Souls lore would basically stand on its own just fine. It just might be a little weird why certain things are being done the way when you're like, oh, it's like there's a meta reference happening here, right? Like it's like it's really not that complicated. I think the problem with Elden Ring is just that it's so big. There is so much more data to sift through. It takes time to parse it, you know? Like, it's not something that you can get done, you know, easily and quickly. Anyway.
I'll tell you what I'm inclined to think. I think that by discovering the first artist shack in Limgrave, in the first area of the game, that we are finding the first breadcrumb in a trail of environmental clues, pointing us towards something we should investigate further. I think the first breadcrumb A painting depicting a certain location points us to the next breadcrumb, which is the soul of the painter pointing at the Church of Pilgrimage in the Weeping Peninsula, a church dominated by a Radagon statue, but surrounded by symbols of those who live in death, and a shield to protect them, as well as a symbol of root resin, leading us to the nearby Tombsward catacombs, where we find the roots of the Great Tree, but also more signs of those who live in death, and Deathroot, a parasitic plant stemming from the very corpse of Godwin, the Prince of Death, growing into the roots of the oak tree. And just outside this catacomb, we find a shield bearing the crest of a movement centered around restoring the souls of the slumbering demigods slain on the night of the Black Knives, like Godwin. A shield whose former owner is staring at a weeping Everjail, wherein we find imprisoned a former associate of Radagon, who just so happens to be holding an important seal, plucked from the very eye socket of Radagon himself.
Oh, now so we go from possibly on this point to now just being like, oh no, yeah, this is definitely a thing. There are 2 of these. So are we trying to say now Radagon lost both his eyes, and Marika too? They lost both their eyes, and it's just kind of hanging around here? Just randomly in these random locations? Like, how long have this happened? When did this happen? Again, it's a very strange progression we have here, where we're going from, okay, well, maybe, possibly, okay, sure, okay, you're leaving me open to kind of disagree with you, but now we're like, oh no, it was definitely plucked here. Okay. I don't know why this is happening, because I don't think it being plucked is necessarily essential for the theory either, but maybe it is, and we just haven't gotten to that point yet. All right. Let's see what we have here.
We encounter another artist's soul pointing to Stormvale Castle, where we find a giant visage of Godwin as the Prince of Death, as well as an omen from the Erdtree capital, where Radagon awaits us to accept our challenge for the title of Elden Lord. The omen sits peacefully with this hound, who faces only the omen as if they share the typical pet-owner bond, like a good doggy, a leal hound, as Radagon is referred to by Queen Marika. The homing instinct artist points us to Radagon, surrounded by the presence of those who live in death, put there by Godwin, along with other clues pointing us at the Tombsward catacombs, where we find Deathroot, also put there by Godwin, who was supposed to be resurrected during the eclipse, which is the symbol on a shield held by a corpse just outside the catacombs, staring at an
Except, again, I didn't mention this earlier because I didn't think it was that relevant, but there wasn't even any indication that the eclipse was trying to bring back Godwin. I mean, there's another soulless demigod there. It's far more logical for that demigod to be the companion, the friend who Castle Soul are trying to revive. You could argue as maybe a test case for doing it with Godwin in the future, but presumably it would be something you'd want to apply to all the soulless demigods, not just him. So this is a very, very odd little point that we're really trying to focus on here. I don't think there's this really huge relevant idea where it's like, oh no, it had to be Godwin specifically here. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this corpse, I mean, there's soldiers and stuff in the general vibe area. So even if we want to say it's going to the point at the church, you yourself established that you have the knights guarding this area. So if you want to go with the Everjail, the church, the Wandering Mausoleum, this entire field is basically their territory.
Everjail, wherein a former
it's literally called Tombsward or Tombsfield.
Bearing a seal that ties him directly to Radagon himself. The entire western half of the Weeping Peninsula is filled with references to Radagon that point to Godwin, that point back to Radagon. The overwhelming evidence surrounding the Church of Pilgrimage makes it abundantly clear that I'm right. Radagon is connected by a trail of obvious breadcrumbs to the death of Godwin.
Okay. Listen, if you want to say that these are breadcrumbs, that's fair. To call them obvious breadcrumbs now, that's a little, again, because from where I'm sitting, it just looks like you talking crazy with some string theory type stuff. We'll just, this and that, and blah, we're here. It's a little it sounds a little bit of a stretch, to say the least, and it definitely feels more like a stringy stretch. So yeah, that's a little silly.
Golden. I'd like to acknowledge this video by Dryleaf Aaron, part 2 of his amazing series covering his theory that we are Godwinning brought back to life. I don't know if I fully agree with his theory, but his video is well done and very convincing. It convinced me to take another look at the paintings in Limgrave, which led me down a very different path. But
for sure,
I appreciate the inspiration nonetheless. I also appreciate the input of those who commented on my theory when I posted it on the Elden Ring Lore Talk Reddit, especially those who brought up counterpoints, which helped me to eliminate some fluff from my research and follow a clearer path. Comment below to
not enough, I would argue, because there's still 90% of it left.
Tell me your thoughts. And if you haven't seen my previous video about the connections between Radagon and Loki, please check it out. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button and subscribe for more. Thank you for watching.
You heard him. I'm gonna have to give this a dislike, guys. I think this was just a really silly vid. I'm sorry to say. Like, this was not even like decent argumentation for half of it. It was mostly string theory, and then like the stuff that felt mostly okay was just kind of, you know, very basic, dry, you know, account of the quest line leading you to Godwin. And it's like, oh, okay. Like a lot of this, I can respect trying to make this because it seems like it was done in case this was like someone's first theory and stuff. I do feel it was a bit long-winded at points. I would have definitely felt like, you know, like, okay, like if we're like this deep into talking about like the lore here, I feel like most people at the very least are going to be a lot more familiar with the content than what we have here. What have you been doing with Radagon? I don't know! Someone tell me! What have I been doing with this man? Without America watching? Oh my, scandalous. Asshole. There we go. There we go. Even a Loki reference couldn't save it. No, but yeah, I'm not crazy about this. But chat, would you believe me if I told you there's more? There is actually a sequel. More proof Radagon killed Godwin at Stormcaller Church. And this was actually the real vid that got me so curious. Because I was like, more? You mean there's proof, period? And now I watch the video and I'm like, no, there's not proof, period. So what's the more? Oh, boy. So again, we are now, while we finish up this last part of this dungeon, we are going to listen to this. Now, how long is this? Oh, this is another 20 minutes. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Contains
welcome.
Spoilers.
This is the third video in a series I call Radagon is Loki, wherein we explore the numerous similarities between
Guys,
Loki,
I am
the
America,
shape-shifting trickster
Radagon.
god of deception, and Radagon, the male half of Queen America. If you haven't watched my previous videos in this series, please do so to have a better understanding of what's presented in this video. My last video analyzed several areas in the western part of the Weeping Peninsula, as well as parts of Stormvale Castle, to uncover evidence tying Radagon to the Night of the Black Knives, an incident in which Godwin the Golden was murdered by Black Knife assassins, triggering the Shattering.
I love it too, because essentially the idea is like there's a string theory where it's like, okay, so you know, we have this Godwin stuff that's pointing to Radagon, and then Radagon stuff that's pointing back to Godwin, right? So like that's sort of like the premise here, and it's like, oh, okay, well, what if Radagon and Godwin were just like best pals before he became Elden Lord? Like, what if that's the connection? What if it has nothing to do with the assassination? Like, we're just kind of jumping the gun and assuming it has to do with that. Like, like it's such a funny little like kind of bit there, and that the actual vid never actually kind of made a point about, okay, well, what about Radagon? Like, what was Radagon's involvement in the assassination? How did he fit in here? It's a bit loud. Oh yeah, I never lowered it like the other. My bad. Here we go.
a war between the demigods. The material we will explore in this video was intended to be included in my last video, but was cut for time. This video will refer to that video several times, so I recommend you watch it too. In this video, we will conduct a similar analysis of another area of the game, the isolated area I refer to as the Lightning Plain in Altus Plateau and the Stormcaller Church. We are looking for more evidence connecting Radagon to the death of Godwin the Golden.
Oh boy. Let's get the search on.
To reach Stormcaller Church, we must pass through a unique and isolated region atop a raised plateau. The vibes here are oddly similar to the Weeping Peninsula. Whereas in the Weeping Peninsula the weather is constant rain, here there is constant lightning due to the many fields of Fulgur Bloom we find here. Fulgur Bloom is a yellow flower that grows in lightning-struck lands, imbued with traces of lightning's essence.
Oh, God.
Starting at the Rampart Side Path site of Grace, northwest of the walls surrounding Lanedale Royal Capital, we must ride west through the Fulgur Bloom while lightning strikes. If you follow the dirt path directly west, you arrive at the Sainted Hero's Grave. A Black Knife Assassin guards the entrance. This boss drops one of the actual Black Knives, imbued by Ronnie with the Rune of Death and used to slay Godwin. But in the Sainted Hero's Grave itself, the items and enemies found do not appear to have much connection to Godwin. In my previous video, we discussed the significance of the boss locked inside the Weeping Everjail, an ancient hero of Zamor. Coincidentally, the boss of the Sainted Hero's Grave is another ancient hero of Zamor.
Yeah, coincidentally. Also, I would like to point out that also when we talk about the ancient hero of Zamor, we had a lot of insinuations and absolutely nothing explaining it. Like, what is the connection? Why does an ancient hero of Zamor have this? Why is he locked in the Everjail? None of this got addressed in the last video. I just kind of want to point out, right? Like, this is, the last video, the more and more you look at it in retrospect, it's like, yeah, it really kind of didn't answer anything. It just kind of tried to point at a bunch of things and vaguely be like, see, a connection.
But this one is protecting the roots of the Great Tree, where bodies are interred for Erdtree burial. As detailed in my previous video, the Knights of Zamor are found in the mountaintops of the Giants. They sided with the Golden Army during Queen Marika's war against the Giants. This ancient hero might well have been a former ally of Godfrey or Marika, or even Radagon himself. Emerging from the Sainted Hero's Grave, we can see two Lanedale soldiers standing on a large boulder just off to the right. The one who is standing stares directly at the Stormcaller Church.
Oh my God.
To the right of the two soldiers is a sword monument. As discussed previously, I believe these sword monuments mark the locations of famous historical battles.
Yeah,
this one
I don't
happens
think many
to be guarded
would disagree.
by a Lanedale knight who sits quietly among the stone markers. When provoked, he uses dragon cult incantations in combat.
Yeah,
the sword
that's
monument
consistent with all of them,
reads,
I'm pretty
the
sure.
The routing of the ancient dragons, Godwin the Golden fought to the last, earning the friendship of dread Fortisax. This is the only site marking a battle between the Erdtree forces and the ancient dragons who attacked the capital. This is the largest quantity of swords we see at any sword monument in the lands between, meaning the sacrifices in the battle that took place here were far greater than any other battle. Notice that we don't...
I do think that this is a interesting point to be made that is actually worth exploring, is if the size of the swords correlate to the size of the death toll in the battle. Because obviously we do see swords used to represent kind of like honoring the fallen warriors in definitely past Miyazaki games. So I could definitely buy this. I haven't personally like addressed this at all because honestly I think that the, you know, in general, the sword monuments are kind of a, you know, they're a soft lore explanation. I don't treat them much as hard lore. You know, it's one of those things where it's like, ah, yes, a sword monument to the first Liurnian war. It's like, wait, there's going to be a second? No wonder Liurnia was able to be prepared for that one. All right. Noticing plot holes. Yeah, hashtag.
See any corpses of ancient dragons here. As we know from the giant corpse of Grandsax that still lies in the capital, the ancient dragons do not age and their bodies do not decay, due to their immortal stone scales. If the Golden Army fought the ancient dragons here, we should see ancient dragon corpses if any were found, but we see none on the Lightning Plains. This means the losses were completely on the Lanedale side until Godwin intervened and defeated Fortisax.
Is that necessarily true? Not really, because they totally could just be like, we don't want to put a bunch of the corpse models there. Like, I would not take it, again, personally, I do think that probably the conflict may have been just Fortisax and Landsax, like it was just those two against the entire Erdtree army or whatever. I am willing to believe that for sure. But I wouldn't say that that's like definite, just because it's like, well, we don't see any dragon corpses here, so clearly none of them died, and you know, it was all the Leyndell forces. Like, there could have been deaths on the other side. I'm not gonna like rule it out or anything. I don't think we get a good indicator either way with what we have. Hey, asshole, asshole, asshole. Oh my god, asshole, you just cost me. You cost me a stupid blood gem. Fuck you. Also, first time I think I've ever been hit by those things in the trap mattered. Oh my god, you guys are so mean. They petrify instead. Yeah, very cool little, I like how they handle, the way the dragons die. Anyway, back to it.
Or perhaps the phrase "fought to the last" means that Godwin was literally the last man standing from the Golden Order.
It's a localization flourish. It just says he became a hero. That's just trying to highlight how, oh my god, really? It's just them trying to highlight how Godwin is, you know, so brave that, you know, he's still standing when the others are dying or whatever. Like, it's very obvious the localization wanted to get more flowery with the language and stuff. Now, did they have insider information that let them know more and be able to word it? Like, again, impossible to know or say, but from a purely outsider and from what other mistakes or, you know, quote unquote errors they've made in the past, I wouldn't bet on it. I certainly would not bet on it. Anyway, let's get back to the video.
Forces. The fact that he fought alone against Fortisax and defeated him makes Godwin absolutely legendary. If one goes uphill to the northeast, Fortisax's sister, Lanciax herself, flies down out of the sky to attack.
And there's no reason for the E to be there in the name. All the dragons have the same sax suffix.
She drops Lanciax's glaive, which describes how she communed or taught dragon lightning incantations to the knights. The spirit of an artist appears on this same. We must first find the champion song painting in the sinking building on the east side of the shaded castle. This artist drops the harp bow, which has a description referencing Rykard, the Lord of Blasphemy, so it's evident that the artist is meant to be pointing at the Volcano Manor. However, I looked at this with my camera tools, and in my opinion, it seems the artist is really pointing at the Sainted Hero's grave and the Black Knife assassin we find there. But even if I'm wrong, Rykard is also identified as a possible co-conspirator.
No, it's pointing at the Sainted Hero grave and the Gelmir hero's grave all the way in the background. That's why it references both stories of the, you know, the honorable golden heroes and the honorless blasphemous heroes, because both of those are featured, and the idea is that you have a Altus Plateau bard essentially who goes around telling songs, you know, of the, you know, singing songs while playing the instrument on the harp bow of both. Now, clearly, guy ended up dying, I guess, at the site of one of his areas, and the artist took advantage of that to, you know, frame it into having both heroes' grave there. But like, yeah, again, this is like we established in the first video. I'm sorry to tell you this, Double Back for Ammo, but you're not doing a very good job actually identifying the point and purpose of these paintings, and it's causing you to make very odd and bizarre conclusions as a result. Like, you really should get this down pat, because your entire theory rests on this, and it's nonsense.
Conspirator in the Night of the Black Knives, by the description of the blasphemous call. As we explored in my last video, here again we have the ghost of an artist pointing toward more connections to the Night of the Black Knives. Down the slope from the sword monument, we find Stormcaller Church. The name Stormcaller harkens back to the Stormcaller Ash of War, which we find at Stormvale Castle, in the area with all the jars. A Leyndell knight on horseback guards the entrance. 2 Leyndell foot soldiers ambush the player who enters via the doorway. We find the Dragon Bolt blessing here in a chest with the description, only those loved by dragons can survive the ordeal of cladding their bodies in lightning. We find lots of gravelstone below the Radagon statue, as we know from climbing up the wing of Grandsax, or while exploring crumbling Farum Azula. Gravelstone is actually clusters of dragon scales. and indicates the presence of the ancient dragons. Does this mean an ancient dragon recently visited the Stormcaller Church? On a corpse near the
I mean, not necessarily, considering that this is a battlefield where the dragons fought. You could say something as simple, again, if we want to go with the idea that no dragons had actually died on this site of the battlefield, which again, I wouldn't even say is necessarily true going by his reasoning. We could just say that, oh, some of Lansax and Fortisax's scales, obviously they ended up getting shaved off, carved off, cut off, sliced off, crushed off, whatever you want to go with. Whatever had happened during their battle with the demigods in Lingdell and all that stuff, the dragons lost some of their scales, and then these scales have then been collected, and you could even say offered or, you know, amassed around the statue of Radagon and specifically the Chalice of Grace and all that stuff. So there's certainly more logical ways we can look at this that doesn't involve saying that a dragon just happened to visit at this church once upon a time for whatever reason.
Gravel stone items, we find 10 lightning great bolts. These are great bolts tipped with a clump of gravelstone shards.
I wonder if he's going to bring up the nomadic merchant.
Items, but we can find them in about a dozen locations, and we can purchase them from the hermit merchant on the mountaintops of the giants. It's interesting that this poor victim died while standing close to a cluster of gravel stones, while holding great bolts also tipped with gravel stones. It's almost like this person, unlike us, was able to craft lightning great bolts and was in the process of doing so when he was murdered. Probably by the foot soldiers. But there is no sight of grace at this church. Does this have any meaning? And if so, what is it? I'll cover this next, among my conclusions.
Okay. We're gonna wait a bit then. Oh, we're already getting to conclusions.
The area west of the Rampart Side Path, Site of Grace, contains several references to Godwinning, mainly referencing the heroic acts he took in life. When the royal capital was attacked by Graysons, he probably aided the Golden Order forces in killing the monster. He then led an army outside the city walls to confront the other ancient dragons, where they gathered on the lightning plains amongst the Folgerdine. Godwin and his men fought the ancient dragons, but it was a massacre. Godwin's men were slain to the last. Godwin himself challenged the dread Fortisax, and miraculously, he won. But rather than kill Fortisax, he befriended this most fearsome of the ancient dragons. As a result of this truce, Fortisax's sister, Lanciax, took human form and began to teach lightning incantations to the remaining knights of the capital, forming what is known as the dragon cult of the capital. With these incantations, the Golden
More like Fortisax and Godwin, and then Lansax helped out after the fact.
Indeed, all the soldiers and knights of the capital use dragon cult incantations to this day.
Well, the knights do. I don't think the soldiers do. I think they just use items related to the cult.
Radagon had led the invasion of Liurnia, was repelled twice, and then repented his sins against Renala in the Church of Vows as the celestial tier of the Eternal Cities. Radagon then married Renala and had 3 children. While teaching himself all the sorceries available,
I want to go back and listen to that because I missed it over the screeching.
Successes to this day. So as I speculated in my previous video, Godwin's successes outshone Radagon. Radagon had led the invasion of Liurnia, was repelled twice, and then
I don't remember this being established in your last video. Maybe you're talking about your video before your last video, because this is like cut off from your old video. Like, I feel like this could have gone another round of script editing if that was the case. Just wanting to FYI.
Repented his sins against Renala in the Church of Vows using a celestial tier of the Eternal Cities. Radagon then married Renala and had 3 children, while teaching himself all the sorceries available at Raya Lucaria Academy. Then he
also, are we trying to say that Radagon is actually secretly behind Godwin's death because he's jealous that... Is this the whole reason why we're being like, oh, no, like, Radagon's obsessed with being, like, a god and trying to, like, supplant Marika and everyone and be, like, the most awesomest, greatest guy ever? Is that really what we're going with? That he was envious that Godwin upstaged him as a hero? Is that really kind of what we're going with here? Lame.
Left Renala and returned to the Erdtree capital, replaced Godfrey as Marika's husband, and became second Elven Lord. He established Golden Order fundamentalism, and with the help of his new son Mikola, began creating new incantations that utilized intelligence as well as fate. But it was all for naught, as the Golden Order fundamentalists became horrifying zealots under the leadership of Rykard, operating out of the Vulcan domain. Mikola abandoned Golden Order.
Rykard? What? Rykard. We're not going to bring up those who live in death, which is where we see most of these fanatics. Like, we're not going to bring up just the general vibe of America's, like, entire dominion. Like, we're just going to be like, no, you see, under Rykard, that's when the fundamentalists went too far. Also, Mikola abandoned fundamentalism when he was still very young. He was still basically a child at that point. Like, what are we talking about here? It wasn't like, well, then Rykard happened.
Fundamentalism.
The problem was that fundamentalism didn't help Melania.
The Scarlet Rot. I believe the attack of the ancient dragons occurred after those events because the Lanedale soldiers and knights still use the dragon cult incantations taught to them by Lanciacs, courtesy of Godwin's bravery. None of them use the incantations Radagon created. I believe that on the lightning plains near the Stormcaller Church, we are...
Except we have plenty of scarabs and stuff along the way in the routes that on the roads that include fundamentalist incantations and stuff, right? So like I don't think that's necessarily like a good indicator. I'm pretty sure the general idea is like, you know, there's not really a good point to having them use that versus the lightning stuff, because the lightning stuff, well, who else is going to use it besides the Farm Azula, and they use the red lightning.
Seeing evidence I think that of Godwin's greatest achievements.
He's always a child, that much is true.
The largest sword monument site in the game honors the battle Godwin and his men fought against the ancient dragons. His former ally Lanciac still guards the somber area, and those who benefited from Godwin's bravery still come here to pay respects. But there is also more evidence in this area with ties to Godwin's death.
Oh boy.
Black Knife Assassin guards the entrance of the Centaur's grave. What is she trying to protect? Or what does she want to accomplish? If she's trying to prevent us from going inside, why? There's no evidence against the Black Knife Assassins inside the Centaur's grave. And nothing.
Well, who's saying she's trying to stop us from going inside?
But the boss of this dungeon is an ancient hero of Xena. Is she trying to prevent us from killing it? The boss drops the ancient dragon knight Kristoff Ashes, but Kristoff's lore is tied to Godefroy the Grafted. We really have no idea what she is doing on the lightning. But she is tied directly to the death of Godwin. She even bears one of the knives used to carve one half of the prisoner of death into his back on that fateful
nice.
Finally, we can analyze the Stormcaller Church. The structure is located at the lowest point of this entire area, which I believe is saying something. It's as if the church is weighed down by some heavy force, pushing it lower than the rest of the area. The church contains a statue of Radagon, not America.
That's an interesting observation.
The soldiers ambush us from behind as we enter. This is the only church in the entirety of the lands between where this happens. During this ambush, a statue of Radagon looks on, as if supervising the event. This ambush has already worked once.
Too late every time.
A dead body on the ground, facing Radagon. Behind one of the ambushing soldiers, we find a chest containing the Dragon Bolt Blessing. The description: only those loved by dragons and survived the ordeal of cladding their bodies in lightning may refer to Godwin being loved by dragons. I was going to say that this item is contained in a chest within Radagon's full view, but then I noticed something funny. I confirmed it with my tools by moving the camera directly in front of Radagon's face. From his perspective, you can't see this chest at all behind the columns on the left. As I said in my video comparing Radagon to Loki, if Radagon is the true and secret architect of the Knight of the Black Knives, then his motive would surely be his insane jealousy of Godwin's immense contributions to the Golden Order.
Yeah, I guess if he's Loki, if we're offering off that assumption, then we're trying to make everything fit into that.
Jealousy.
Sure.
Is it because Radagon was jealous of Godwin and the way the dragons came to love him that he can't bear to see this item describing those loved by the dragons tucked in the corner of the church?
Ah, yes, because Radagon has the magical ability, like us, to read item descriptions. Oh, God. This is truly a magical analysis, like none I have ever heard before. Absolute cinema. Ay, ay, ay. All right. All right, let's finish up listening to this.
It's very interesting for anyone looking deeper into the lore
I'm gonna
of
put this at
Radagon.
0.5.
Here, on an entire plane full of artifacts of Godwin's history, we find a church named after an Art of War of Stormvale Castle, where we previously found a visage of Godwin as the Prince of Death in the burial chamber. The church is guarded out front by a knight on horseback, patrolling here as if to prevent anyone undesirable from entering the church. But why then? Why not just let the person wander into the church and be ambushed by the guards inside? I think that the main reason you post a knight to patrol outside the scene of an ambush is because you set up this ambush with a particular target in mind. The knight—
Is it an ambush? Like, why are we trying to say that there's a particular target? Like, couldn't the knight just, if the idea was to ambush, couldn't the knight just ride in after luring someone out? Like, if that was the idea, like, why can't we just have it where a bunch of soldiers are kind of just loitering around doing their kind of guard thing, and it just so happens that they were positioned in an area where you happen to walk in and get caught? I mean, it's not like you can't go through the side entrance or something. It's kind of broken and in ruins.
Is here to prevent the wrong person from entering the church and springing the trap. But if the right person were to approach, the knight would just wave them in. Once they walk through the doors, trap springs and the person is taken off guard, all while Radagon watches. The trap has already sprung and one individual has suffered the consequences of wandering in here.
But wait, I thought you said it had to be the right person. So are we saying that guy was the right person and now the trap is pointless? Or are we saying there are more than one right person? Like, who are the right who's the right person? Who are the right people?
Lightning great bolts, which are tipped with gravel stones. The gravel stones are arranged around the foot of Radagon's statue in an interesting pattern. I'm not sure what this pattern means, but there are 7 of them here, with a sacred tier in the middle. There are 7 shard bearers.
A pattern requires there to be a pattern. This is just them randomly. Like, I guess you can vaguely say they're kind of hexagonal, but then there's the 7th one kind of ruins all that, right? Like, it's not really a pattern. It's like, oh, there's just a bunch of them around them. Like, you just kind of drop it, and there. Like, what are we talking about here?
We were meant to slay.
Are we trying to say, like, the pattern is that it's vaguely circular?
So perhaps this is the significance.
Oh, while editing, he noticed. There are 7... Oh, my... Guys, there are 7 Black Knife Assassins, and there are 7 Gravelstone. 7!
But like I mentioned earlier, a dragon has clearly been here.
Guys! 7!
But like I mentioned...
7! I love how it's all caps.
But like I mentioned earlier, a dragon has clearly been here, many times perhaps, and that's why we see gravel stones here. Were these left by Lanciax or her brother Fortisax? And if so, what were they hoping to find in this church? Some consolation after Godwin's death? Or perhaps, could they have been searching for the site where he was ambushed? There is no site of grace in this church. What does that mean? This isn't the only church without a site of grace. There's also the Second Church of Merica not far away. There are also the Rose Church and the Church of Irith, both in Liurnia. Kalu Baptismal Church in the Weeping Peninsula.
So there are a bunch of churches that don't have grace points. I would even dare say there may be either just as many or perhaps possibly, again, I don't know, but possibly even more. So even if not, let's assume that there's more with grace points. Clearly, there's not much of a pattern here if half of them have grace points and the other half don't. Like, this is... why are we bringing this up?
And, technically, the Chapel of Anticipation is also a church without a site of grace. The Chapel of Anticipation is where we start the game, called back here by the guidance of grace itself. I dare say the reason we don't find a site of grace here is because it has leapt into our very pocket. The starting player finds a memory of grace already in their possession, as if the site of grace that might have once been in this church decided to travel with us. The Kalu Baptismal Church is in the Ailing Village, where all the inhabitants and the local rat population have been taken over by the frenzied flame, the madness which spreads like a plague. Could this be why grace has abandoned this church? The Church of Irith also provides no grace. This is where we meet Sorcerer Tops, a crestfallen and mediocre mage. Again,
there's this assumption that there is grace here in the first place. Again, if half of them have it and half of them don't, why should we make any assumption that they would be here by default? Why would it have to be the churches? There are plenty of places that have nothing to do with churches or holiness or anything where there is also grace. This seems like a very arbitrary distinction to being made here, that okay, well, these churches don't have it, so there must be some reason, versus these churches that do, when there are a million places that do or don't have grace. Again, this is one of those cases where we're really hyper fixating on something that has a much more mundane explanation that perfectly suits all the quote-unquote evidence that we have gathered here. Like,
who's been locked
this
out of
doesn't need a deeper explanation.
However, he does serve as a kind of guide to the Liurnia region, providing a lot of small talk to the Tarnished. Is that perhaps why Grace abandoned this church? Because Tops is such a buzzkill? Or because he provides all the guidance that we
I do
need
like
here?
the idea
the Rose
that,
Church
that
is the
Grace
second
was just like, nah, man, you're a downer.
And is where he offers the Tarnished a chance to join Mogwin dynasty. Inside the church, we find several blood roses and a lesser sanguine noble. It's clear this church has been intentionally desecrated by the Lord of Blood and his followers, and so we find no grace or sacred tears here. We find a similar situation at the Second Church of Merica, where we encounter rotten strays patrolling outside, and blood roses growing inside. That's because Eleonora, violent Bloody Finger, is here, having just slaughtered Bloody Finger Hunter Europe. And if not, then another lesser sanguine noble is here. Like the Rose Church, the second church has just begun to fall under the influence of the Formless Mother. Grace has already left this church, but the statue of Marika and the sacred tear are still here. Grace in Elden Ring represents something like the Holy Spirit from the Catholic faith, calling us back to the lands between and providing guidance on where to go.
Okay,
Except for
sure,
the Rose
I
Church,
guess.
they all still have sacred tears, which are the blessings of the Ur tree, collected in a chalice, and the true object of worship in every church. Churches in the realm of shadow do not have sacred tears. Many of them have scatter tree fragments, which is the object of worship replacing sacred tears. So, for the few churches in the lands between that do not have sites of grace, there is a clear reason why, such as a force of corruption. But at the Church of Eric and at the Stormcaller Church, the reason is not so clear. This video
because
isn't
it's
about
not a
the
good
Church of
place
Eric,
for
so
you to
let's
have
focus on
a
Stormcaller.
checkpoint
As
there?
I've been hinting at, I believe that Stormcaller Church may be the site where Godwin and Golden was ambushed.
Again, just to bring up the Church of Erith, he says there's a clear reason, but he doesn't really give a very strong case on why Tops being there would do so. It's just kind of like, well, maybe because he's a downer? Like, there's a site of grace, like, outside the church. Why isn't that a problem? Like, how far do you have to get away before it's like, oh no, this holy ground of the church, it's being desecrated in some way. We need to get away in order for us to be able to put down grace, even though we can put grace in a bunch of different places, including desecrated places, like literally where all the blasphemous people are dying with Rykard. So, like, again, I feel like this is a little arbitrary, my friend. Also, welcome back, Nick.
Proximity to the area where Godwin achieved his greatest triumphs. The knight who patrols outside was posted there to allow Godwin through and to turn back all others. The Black Knife assassins who leapt on Godwin from behind the door have been replaced by Lanedar soldiers because the Tarnished encountering two Black Knives here would be a little too revealing. But one of the assassins rests at the entrance of the Sainted
you guys,
Hero's
it would be
grave.
not subtle enough if they had two Black Knives here. So we're having the soldiers and all that because they're working with the... this is... I love how this man thinks.
Having almost, but not quite, returned to the scene of the crime. And I believe Godwin's body location has been replaced by this corpse, holding lightning great bolts fashioned from the scales of the dragons who loved him so much. Was he perhaps lured here to receive the Dragon Bolt blessing contained in the nearby chest? Who knows? But the ancient dragons have visited this church repeatedly to try and determine what happened to Godwin, or perhaps to mourn. That's why there's no site of grace at this church, because of what happened here to America's bravest,
The ancient dragons have come here to mourn Godwin. Man. So we have the idea that Godwin, 100%, he definitely fought Fortisax. No other dragons died on this battlefield, but apparently they were there. So all the dragons just saw how Godwin was just such a bro with Fortisax. They're like, I guess we surrender. Oh, goodness me. God, I love this because we never even addressed this entire idea earlier. We're just kind of going with it. Oh yeah, he totally, like, the dragons revisit. Like, it's not like we just collected a bunch of gravel stone from the battlefield and brought it all over into the church or what have you. It's like a holy place or whatever, and we associate the gold and the lightning and all that stuff with the dragons with the holy gold and all that stuff. It can't be anything related to that. It has to be because they're here to mourn Godwin by somehow collecting their gravel stone as an offering to Radagon. So silly.
The blessing of grace has left this place following what happened, all under Radagon's watchful eye. I believe the Stormcaller Church is where Radagon watched Godwin suffer a horrible fate, as he watched the Black Knight assassins carve one half of the curse mark of death into his back, turning him into the first of the soulless demigods, the Prince of Death. If you're not convinced, here's...
If you're not convinced, wow, why would I be convinced? I mean, are we getting to the actual evidence part soon? No, but the notion that, okay, now we're trying to say that the entire event of the Night of the Black Knives, it didn't involve them actually infiltrating Langdell. It apparently happened at the Stormcaller Church, because apparently that's where Radagon got to witness all that. Or are we trying to say that they killed Godwin, they carved it into him? No, yeah, that doesn't make sense because the cinematic shows the tile floors and everything, and it's clearly indoors in an actual building. Like, are we trying to say, like, oh no, the church back there still had its tiles and stuff? It's like, geez, Radagon, it's strange how Godwin just happened to be at your church the night he got assassinated. What's up with that? Man, that's not sus. God, this opens up such a huge can of worms.
An extra little bit of evidence. Directly east of the Stormcaller Church, there is a lonely flower on the hill, a Miquella's lily, its wilting petals facing the church. I believe the rarity and placement of these flowers throughout the lands between are meant to show us signs of the travels of Miquella at the point in his youth where he was experimenting with unalloyed gold in his desperate attempts to cure.
This is an interesting idea. I don't know if it's true. I'd be much more inclined to believe that these flowers are just a rare flower that exists in general, and they've been retroactively associated with Mikola and with Trina. Because as far as I recall, I don't think we see these like spawn or associate with them otherwise. Like maybe like moved and planted some places associated with them, but not like, oh, they're just kind of growing in areas. Like I don't think we see any of these in the DLC. We see different flowers that are associated instead. Maybe lily type flowers, but not the same kind for sure. So yeah, I don't know if I buy this.
I personally believe that Mikola followed Radagon here in secret, hiding here and watching from this hill as Radagon and the Black Knife assassins ambush Godwin in the Stormcaller Church. I also wonder if this might have been part of the reason that Mikola abandoned Golden Order fundamentalism, abandoned his father, and abandoned the royal capital in favor of heading north to grow
He did it before all this!
Paladry. And perhaps this is when Mikola began to form his plan to become a god in his own right. I believe this might be why he engraved the following on the Golden Epitaph sword, a sword made to commemorate the death of Godwin the Golden, the first of the demigods to die, infused with the humble prayer of a young boy. Oh brother, Lord brother, please die a true death. Thank you for watching this video. And if you watch my previous videos in this series, thank you very much. It means the world to me to talk about Elden Ring and share my research and the discoveries I've made. Please share your thoughts in the comments. I don't have many more videos in this series. After all, there's not much more information available about Radagon. And that's likely on purpose, and all reported videos. I'm currently analyzing these statues throughout the nights between to determine if this could be Radagon and some theories. And I'm also outlining a video discussing all of America's and Radagon's children and their stories as being parallels of their parents. If you're interested in those, please consider subscribing to receive notifications when those videos go live.
Well, I am not interested in those, but again, everybody, I got it. If you want to like and subscribe, you do so. I will be giving a dislike because, yeah, I think this was a horrible sequel to a horrible original vid. Like, oh my gosh. This was absolute crazy talk for 90% of it. It's actually kind of wild, but like, oh well. It gave us something to pass the time while I go dungeon diving. I didn't see a single thing in the entire Loran Root dungeon that was worth taking a photo of. I think that tells me that, yep, I've pretty much explored and seen all there really is to see with the dungeons. Maybe I can get a shot of those claw boys. Might want to talk about them in relation to Jura and stuff maybe a bit more, but that was quite the tale. Respectfully, that sounded like a whole lot of nothing. Yeah, it's a very bad theory. It's just very bad. The logic, the reasoning, it's trying to string together a lot of stuff. Like I said, I think the biggest problem is that it's relying so heavily on the wandering artist things, and it's completely missing so many very basic facts and details about those paintings that would sort of cut off all this other talk we're going about. Oh, the painter is pointing, and it's the secret breadcrumb trail to all this crazy stuff about Radagon and Godwin. It's not even tried to address or try to come up with it. And this is where I said it once, I say it again. You have to run your scenario. How the hell does any of this make any sense when you're trying to talk about the practicalities and the facts dealing with the Knight of the Black Knives? Why are Morgoth everyone worried about anyone possibly infiltrating the Erdtree capital if Godwin wasn't apparently even in the Erdtree capital? Because Radagon could apparently watch him getting assassinated by the Black Knives right there at the Stormcaller Church. And for some reason, in the middle of the night, Mikola is following him over here to this. Like, what? Why are they just waltzing all the way out there beyond the rampart walls in order to do this? Like, what did Radagon be like? Oh yes, Godwin, let me take you here. Again, there's so many problems. How were the assassins getting caught and ended up with Tish getting killed? Like, there's so much stuff where it's like, how would any of this have worked? Are we trying to believe that Radagon's secretly orchestrating this and he just does a bad job in cleaning up his tracks, and yet somehow he manages to get off scot-free? America, nobody like involved in this. Mikola, even no one's like, oh yeah, you know, the king, he kind of decided he would kill the prince. Loki, will you watch Smotown's Balancers video? Nah, I'm not really interested in the Balancer stuff by Smo. Again, I'm just not really interested in, like, you know, the watching Night Rain lore vids in general. Maybe in the future I will, and we'll come back and watch it. But for now, especially considering I haven't actually completed the boss fight myself on the Everdark version, I definitely don't think it would be fair of me to kind of like jump the gun and watch a whole lore video on them, because I'm sure Smo's going to mention the Everdark stuff. Anyway, guys, I thought that this was a nice way to pass the time. I don't know if I would call it a productive way to pass the time in the end, but hey, it was something. So thank you all for kind of like sitting in and experiencing this very, very bizarre stuff. Again, I will link these videos in the description if you want to watch them for yourself, you know, want to like and subscribe as he asks, or all that. Again, I'm not gonna, don't don't go like decide you're gonna just like slam and hate watch or anything like that. Again, guys, be respectful and all that stuff. This was something where I was legitimately curious if I was potentially missing something, and there was going to be some interesting points brought in here, and well, it ended up just being a bunch of crazy talk as you would expect. So, c'est la vie, it is what it is. All right, we're gonna end things here now. Thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye.